Bonjour à tous, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We are so excited to welcome Carline today for this third webinar for Bastille Day. So first of all, happy Bastille Day to all of you. We've had a few messages saying happy Bastille Day, so we are very thankful for that. And before we get started, this is a webinar about etiquette. So I'd like to present my apologies to the viewers who are with us today. There's 56 of you connected. I had to run from the bakery where we just did the bread presentation and the croissants, so we are a few minutes late. And I know, Carline, I should have been here 15 minutes, but please accept my apologies. I was chatting with our head patisserie. So here we are now. We are extremely grateful to be welcoming Carline. We'll be presenting this webinar about the etiquette. Carline is the 7th generation of the very famous silversmith at the House of Christofle. She is probably born with a silver spoon in her mouth, aren't you, Carline? But that doesn't mean that you are born knowing all about the etiquette. So Carline has traveled the world and has probably had many stories to tell us about how to respect this etiquette, which to me is the rules of polite things we can do to respect each other. It's very close to my heart because I've been brought up in France and I live in Australia. So we do have a few differences in the way we invite guests, we welcome guests. So we're all here listening to you. So please welcome Carline.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Betty, for the introduction. And of course, happy Bastille Day. It is true I can be literally accused of having been born with a silver spoon, as my family, through the brand it created in 1830, had helped to codify all matters of etiquette. And this is why I have been invited today to share some of the tips acquired over the last 2 centuries and through a lot of personal experience as well. The French ancestral rules of etiquette, like language and manners, have evolved over time. The first manual of etiquette were written as early as 1672 and addressed both the behavior of a host as well as those of guests. Consequently, I will touch on both of them today. Etiquette is, of course, a French word. Etiquette evolved out of Louis XIV's court at Versailles, paving the way for what it meant to be civilized. Whereas originally the rules of etiquette were devised to keep the nobility in check, they have evolved to become a standard of behavior to which everyone can refer to in the context of social interaction. Contrary to popular belief, it was designed to make everyone feel at ease in social circumstances and erase any difference in upbringing and cultural background. They were ritual performed for the sake of other people. Today, we'll only have the time to look at etiquette around the entertaining at home, around the dinner party. So regardless of the environment or the circumstances, the principle is that anyone, regardless of who they are, can accept an invite without and sit through an entire meal without fear of embarrassment. It is always better to be remembered for your scintillating personality than for your notorious faux pas. I believe the best way not to leave anything out is to start chronologically the beginning of this unspoken, quote-unquote, social contract. The beginning of the social contract is, in fact, the invitation. The invitation will give the tone and of the upcoming event, and it will determine whether it is or not the type of event you might enjoy attending as a guest. So let's begin with an exercise. Assuming that the date and the location of the invite are not a crucial stumbling block to begin with, and that you equally enjoy all the host. You receive 5 invites for the same day to similar event. Let's say it's a dinner party scheduled in 6 weeks' time, which usually is the right length of time if you really want all the people there for a special occasion. Otherwise, 2 weeks' notice suffice. The first invite is going to be a text message on your phone. The second invite is going to be sent via email on a paperless post. The third is received via regular mail Your name and address are handwritten on the envelope. The inside of the invite is of good quality paper and leaving the first line as a blank with your name filled in. The fourth invite looks like a hand calligraphy envelope of good quality paper. The invite inside matches the envelope and the text is hand calligraphy. The fifth one, let's say you receive an invite for Mardi Gras with the text of the invite attached to a Venetian mask. The text is hand calligraphy on quality stock. All other things being equal, which of the event are you likely to attend, and ask yourself why. In fact, each type of event unconsciously says something about the host and the upcoming event. A text message always indicates a hurried last-minute get-together with low expectation. It is a dinner between friends, and it will be very informal regardless. The paperless post email can be beautifully designed, yet it costs very little in terms of time and money, and tells you the host is a busy person who enjoys planning event as long as it doesn't take too much time out of their busy schedule. In any case, it does imply that the event is semi-casual, and so will be the dress code. The fill-in invite indicates that the event is a very large one, and that it is formal, will be well catered for, and that you are, as a guest, you are just a number on a list. I'm sure you're a prestigious guest no matter what. In all likelihood, it is somewhat professionally orientated, and your name will be checked at the door. The last invite, on the other hand, has all the personal touches to make you feel quite special. The hand calligraphy states without saying that the event will be formal, that the host is going through a lot of trouble to host this particular event, and that the event is likely to be chic and upscale. It is naturally the type of event very few people will turn down unless they have an unbreakable previous engagement. The fifth invite has all the hallmark of the hand-done personalized one with a touch of whimsicality and fun, and it will guarantee the event will be out of the ordinary and the event you are likely to remember for a long time to come. And of course, as a host, you can play on all the variation on the last theme. For example, the event is a celebration of food with a new chef, and you send a bottle of wine with the label becoming the text of the invite itself, or cookies prepared by the chef with the text of the invite on the box lid. Or it's a Chinese theme invite, and you send a fan on which you have written the body of the invite. It's a baby shower, and you send the invite on a teething ring, or perhaps on a little teddy bear. The more special the invite, the more original, the most likely you will enthuse all your guests into attending and create a buzz of anticipation around the event. Now for the text of the invite, and I'm sure many of the invites you have been shown as slides are not at all corresponding to this. There are several schools of thoughts, but of course the best and the best is not reserved just for wedding invitation. First, on the text, you will have the name of the host or hostess. Then, the sentence that says, request the pleasure of your company is a standard formula and has worked out for centuries. Even today, there is no reason to change it. Then you have the name of the event or the occasion. The date follows the event, the time, and then the address, with the full address, but not including the postcode. On the right inside of the invite, you normally find the dress code: suit, cocktail, black tie, white tie, etc. On the left-hand corner is the RSVP date and the address you send it to. Nowadays, the host will usually try to make it easier for you and have an email address or a phone number for you to text. Since RSVP, I'm afraid we're not talking about a dating site here, normally stands for please reply, it shouldn't have a date, because the normal etiquette is to reply from the time you receive the invite within 72 hours. Most people have forgotten this simple rule of etiquette and therefore RSVP is now followed by the date at which you would want your guests to reply. Normally, an invite that is sent by mail should be replied likewise by RSVP sent by mail. If it's sent by email, the same way. But if you, for example, are going to go through the trouble of answering in writing, which is the correct thing to do, do not forget, at least on the flap of the envelope, to state your full name. You never know how many Mary Smiths or Carline Bouilhet Christofle have been invited to the event. Whenever the host writes down a dress code, the dress code is to be adhered to. If those things annoy you, you find it old-fashioned, and you generally regard those considerations as unimportant or trivial, then don't answer or don't go to the event and refuse the invitation. Remember, an invite is a social contract, whether you're entering into. No one is holding a gun to your head to accept the invitation. But if you do, you are expected to play the game. So a black tie event requires men to be in suit with a bow tie or sober tie, and women to wear long dresses and be otherwise formally attired. A white tie event means tails and hat for men, lavish ball gowns for women, and probably with their best jewels. When the invite states cocktail, then women can be dressed in shorter gown, but certainly no one should be in business attire or anything that belongs on the dance floor of a nightclub. Short pants, miniskirts are never considered proper, regardless of how beautiful your legs might be. I've been to many parties where the type of event per se called for a particular dress code, but few seem to recall what that dress code should have been. So, I have witnessed many hosts deploring the lack of effort made on the part of their guests for the occasion. The same host often look at it as an offense, when none was intended, yet their intention were left for interpretation to begin with, because in the dress code, they didn't want to appear snob or elitist, and therefore didn't write down a particular dress code. A summer garden party, for example, implies for women the wearing pretty, floaty, feminine dresses and hats. Basically, think the races for Melbourne Cup, which seems to be the only instance where Australians do not need to be reminded of a particular dress code. Men will wear long pants, certainly not shorts, regardless of the weather, and a jacket, but ties are not necessary, and an open collar is quite acceptable. A significant birthday party implies that men will wear jacket and long pants, and women will dress up for the occasion. How much or how little will depend on the tone set by the invite. The latest 50th birthday party I went to required for people to be dressed up. The host had hired lavish caterers, installed a marquee, had a band playing all night, had given the party the theme as a 60th party, served champagne, yet most of the guests showed up in shorts, some even in thongs. Only one third adhered to the dress code, with most of them saying, "Oh, we hate costume parties anyway, who can be bothered?" And they didn't feel they had to comply with the host wishes, which was clearly stated on the invite. The result was a host very disappointed by the lack of respect and appreciation shown by his guest. So we go back to the invite. All the invitations out, the guests are responding. You have a list ready of the yes and no. Your RSVP time should be within 10 days of sending the invitation. As a hostess, this time will allow you to invite alternate guests if you hadn't realized some of them might be on a business trip or out of the country. It doesn't necessarily mean that the second tier of guests are less important. It simply means that for any parties, you will have some priorities, and those will be reflected in any case throughout the evening. The other alternative, which I found quite effective, is to send a save the date. The save the date will be sent by email ahead of the invite and gives you a chance to figure out which one of your guests could not make it regardless. And it will help you eliminate some of the names and send the proper invite only to those who are likely to come. Checking the broader social calendar is always a good idea. To host an intimate dinner party for, let's say, 12 or 14 people, and doing so on Melbourne Cup night or on the day of the grand final might not yield the result you wanted to begin with. And no, once you have received an invite, you can't call the host asking for your lover, a girlfriend, your neighbor, or a friend to come with you to the event. If the host wanted you to come accompanied by somebody else, they would have sent the invite addressed to you and a guest. If you absolutely want to be accompanied regardless, and you know the host very well, you can ask the invite to be extended to include your +1. Otherwise, simply refuse the invitation, putting the host in an awkward position by having to explain to you at the last minute why they couldn't give you a +1 is the opposite of thoughtfulness and should be avoided at all costs. Many people have told me that they don't know how to turn down an invitation, and they always feel pressed to explain why. In fact, you don't have to explain at all why you can't attend. Your RSVP should simply state, "Thank you for the invitation." You put in the event and the date. "Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend due to prior commitment. I wish you a successful, beautiful evening, and I hope we can catch up at a later date." The host doesn't need to know you'll be having tests in hospital, or that your daughter is coming out of rehab, or you're visiting a friend in prison, or you can't get off your couch from the latest Netflix series. Likewise, an acceptance is just as simple. "Thank you for your kind invitation to join you." You put down the occasion and the date again. "I will be delighted to attend and look forward to it." As a guest, unless the occasion is very informal and just a get-together, you are in no way obliged to add something like whether you can bring something or help in any way. The logistics are all part of the host's obligation to cater for your well-being. That is their job. As the guest, you are only supposed to be appreciative of the effort made on your behalf and be entertaining. That is your job. In many cultures, however, arriving at a party empty-handed can be considered quite gauche. However, there are right and wrong hostess gift. Let's start with the most obvious two. The matter of flowers. A hostess in general will have given a great deal of consideration as to where she wants to put flowers to turn her home magical for the occasion. She will have chosen flowers to match her theme and put them in strategic places all over the house. In all likelihood, she would have also used her best vases, and most likely all of them. When you bring flowers at the last minute to a dinner party, the hostess is duty-bound to unwrap your gift right away, put them in water, and place them in a place of honor where they can be admired by everyone. If she has spent hours arranging the look she wanted to begin with, by bringing a bouquet, you are forcing her to move things around instead of welcoming her other guests. She will need to find a suitable container, which, after she has used the best one, may not honor the beauty and expense you went through as a guest to offer her the magnifique bouquet you came in with. So what you end up with is an exasperated hostess to have to deal with housekeeping chores at the last minute, and a disappointed guest who will not appear disappointed guest that the hostess didn't seem to appreciate the expense they went through with their bouquet. If you wish to give flowers, which is always a very nice gesture, you have them sent the day before or the morning of the event. The hostess then will have plenty of time to display them suitably. As a guest, the advantage is that you don't have to bounce a bunch of flowers with high heels, your bag, etc. Wines. That is the second thing. A great host will have chosen the wines according to the menu. Vintage wines will have all been decanted, and they will be displayed before you even ring the doorbell. The host will generally have ordered enough wine to cover the entire event without running out. If you bring a single bottle and there are 8 people invited, the host should normally serve you special wine, which to all of the guests, which means half of them will be left out. If the wine, moreover, needs to be decanted, then the host has to find another decanter, which he may not have on hand, and serve it from that decanter. Again, you're putting the host in an embarrassing situation at the very last minute. It is unnecessary. If you insist on bringing wine, then make it a dessert wine. The dessert wine, only a few will partake in that wine along with coffee and liquor. The dessert wine is usually served straight out of the bottle so that you will not have the problem of looking for one. If you bring, it is the same thing for champagne. If you bring a warm bottle, then the host will know that this is to be savored at a later time and does not need to be opened right away. Less contentious gifts are always good quality chocolate, which a host will offer to everyone with coffee after dinner, a rare sweet, colorful sugars, scented candle, a votive, the latest book on the market, etc. The idea behind being a good guest is that the host will not remember you for having to put all of his attention on you once you arrive at the party, and that they can send you a thank you note for your gift within the next 3 days after the party, of course. Time of arrival. Proper etiquette, as observed in most embassies, still taken as a landmark for polite behavior throughout the world, requires that guests arrive on time or within 15 minutes of the time stated on the invite. If the invite is under the auspices of an ambassador, a member of a royal family, a president or minister, then the guests should arrive 15 minutes early regardless. Otherwise, an 8 o'clock dinner means that the hostess intends to have you sit down by 8:30. If the invite specifies 7:30 for 8 o'clock, it indicates that the meal will be preceded by a short cocktail hour. A well-timed meal should last exactly 2.5 hours from start to finish, including coffee service. For 2.5 hours, your job as a guest is to be entertaining, and as the host is to make sure you're not lacking into anything. If it's a host's role to introduce his guests to one another upon arrival, this should be done basically organically, and doesn't mean taking the merely arrived guest around to every other guest. It only means to have the new guest being introduced to the closest one around. And you should first address the other person. For example, Christina, may I introduce you to James Smith? James is a property developer. James Christina Jones is an interior designer. Lately, she has been working on several projects in your area. Or for example, and you may have some friends in common or some people you know together. Or another introduction, James Smith, this is Christina Jones, a dear friend of mine. Christina just returned from Spain. Isn't that where you were last summer? You have given them enough for them to be able to continue the conversation on their own. So if you have, unfortunately, rainy or very cold weather on the day of your party, you should have a place or a room dedicated to taking coats and umbrella, of course. The coats or umbrella that will be borrowed after the party, if rain starts in the middle of dinner, should be returned, of course, within 24 hours without the host having to ask for it. You should always have also a mixture of electrical light and candlelight. Not only candlelight is flattering on the skin, but it also helps you measure time. Good candles will take exactly 2.5 hours to burn from tip to bottom. And therefore, without looking at your watch, you will be able to know exactly where you're at in your timing. So now we have the menu. If the host gathers only a few friends around the table and knows them well, he may wish to cater to the idiosyncrasy, such as their latest crazy diets, whether it's vegan, paleo, whatever it is, but only if he's inclined to do so. Accepting an invite into a home is not ordering a dish from a menu in a restaurant and letting the waiter know exactly what your particular requirements are. To be blunt, you're not paying for it. Your host is. You're meant to eat at the very least taste everything you're presented with. The host's job is to make sure that if by chance there are vegetarians among his guests, they will leave plenty of alternate dishes to accommodate them besides the cheese course and the dessert, of course. The host will present some dishes without butter, milk, and cheese as well. Variety of breads will include wheat-free option. For those who don't drink, there should be plenty of sparkling and still water on offer. A printed menu is in fact designed to show the guests what to avoid in case they suffer from some food intolerance. Good manner is to help yourself to every dish, but only a tiny quantity if you can't ingest it, and certainly not complain out loud about the menu which didn't specifically cater to your taste. Leaving some food on your plate is not rude. Commenting on a dish, unless it is designed to be a compliment, certainly is. There are some dishes where presenting an alternative is always wise. Oysters, for example. Many crustaceans fall into that category as well. There are too many risks of allergies. Offal like liver, tripe, brains, as well as very spicy dishes also fall into that category. I would, for my part, avoid messy dishes which can result in unavoidable stain, such as spaghetti or whole crabs, for example, because most people don't know how to handle them. When your guests know in advance you can only cook spicy curries, upon accepting the invite, they will have snack beforehand if they can't stomach it. Or even better, just refuse the invite altogether. Naturally, if your guests are mostly Islamic, you will avoid pork. And if they are devout Catholic and you have invited them on a Friday night, you may wish to avoid serving red meat. That is simple, common courtesy and a respect of religious belief. Jewish people, however, cannot expect their host to have prepared a kosher meal, as it requires a completely different preparation to the meal. Salt, pepper, additional spices could be set on the table for those who want to add flavor to a particular dish. In fact, the rule of thumb is the good of the group as opposed to those of the individuals. As a guest, when you find yourself in a foreign environment, one in which you have lost your bearing because the party you have accepted to attend is not quite what you imagine, since it introduces implements or dishes that you're not accustomed to, then the safest bet is always to take your cues from the hostess. You start after she does, you pick up the same implement she does if you're unfamiliar with what has been laid on the table. Your role as a guest is to be entertaining and interesting and not attract attention to yourself for all the wrong reasons. Upon sitting down, the guest introduces himself to the person sitting on his right and then on his left, and alternate his attentions between the two. If you can't talk to anyone across the table due to the width of the table, then your choices are the guest on your left and the guest on your right. If you don't have any stories of your own, laugh or comment on those of others. Strong opinions are not frowned upon, but intolerance is. And if you disagree strongly with someone, try to change the subject rather than enter into a heated argument which will draw everyone else and end up with one or more people being deeply offended. On the subject of appropriate discussion, it really depends on the country you live in. Marital spat are not a subject in any country for any discussion. No spending an hour talking about your children, regardless of how brilliant they might be, or your ailments. However, if you have been recently in a hospital, police station, a courthouse, you may have a few anecdotes about your experience, as long as you don't reveal anything about what brought you there in the first place. Politics are fine, unless a large group gangs up on one individual who votes for a party different from their own. And again, it should only be spoken in general terms. In some culture, talking about sex or relationship is also acceptable, but again, without any specifics or crudeness, and certainly without naming anyone. Same is true of religion, as you may deeply offend someone without knowing it. It doesn't mean conversation have to be all about sports or the weather, but be informed about the latest current affairs to have a topic to talk about. Literature, music, art, films, or travel also work very well, but deploring how expensive your first-class ticket to Paris was is inappropriate. You don't have to be superficial in your conversation. You just need to be attentive and sensitive to other people sharing the same meal as you do. Now, placement at the table. The host and hostess generally sit either at either end of the table or in the middle across from each other. The French will normally sit in the middle of their guests across from each other. The English will tend to sit at either end of a rectangular table. Guests are alternated by gender, with the most important male guest on the right and then on the left of the hostess, with same reciprocity for the most important female guest. The ranking can be done solely by age, with the youngest guest at the end of the table or the middle, depending on your seating preference. This will also help the staff serve the lady on the right of the host first, followed by the one on the left, then down the table. Women are always served first, men second, older people before younger one, and hostess last of the women, and the husband last of the male. If you're hosting a meal with a prince or a cleric, then they replace you as the host and hostess, and you become their right as a male or a female. Husband and wife in French table are always separated unless they have been married for less than a year. The idea is to be able at the dinner party to mingle with other people and interact with strangers rather than rely on the safety net. Place card for every guest, avoid a great deal of confusion at the last minute. As the host, the table placement requires a great deal of thought, as you wish to place people next to each other who may have common ground. An artist next to a collector, for example, a musician next to a music teacher, a security trader next to a banker, similar field, different profession, or a newly divorced father of two next to a widow, and so on. I'm not saying a dinner party is the right time to make business connection or to do some matchmaking of your own, but just figuring out if the ice can be broken between your guests so they can find things in common to talk about. Place card can be as formal or informal as you wish, and play with the theme at hand. Think outside the box. A Christmas party, display a Christmas ornament with the name of your guest on it. The guest will take home a souvenir to boot. An engagement party, a small bonbonniere with their name on it. For an autumn feast, use paper leaves, for example. A seafood lunch, use seashells. A dinner following a gallery opening, why not put their name on little frames? It just adds an unforgettable touch and can be done quite cheaply, but it does take time and foreplanning. If you have several tables, then I advise as a host that you have a board chart laying out where everyone should sit upon arrival. With Chinese host, the biggest difference is in the seating arrangement. The seat of honor is always reserved for the guest with the highest status or foreign guest of honor, usually the one in the center of the table, always facing east or facing the entrance. The other guest status is indicated as to where they sit in comparison to that guest of honor. And the host, unfortunately, is always in the least desirable seat, close to the kitchen or the service door. Accidents at the table. Who says accidents never happen in the course of dinner? A guest speaks with their hand and accidentally knocks down a glass of red on what he had noticed were immaculate, pristine white linen. The host will either ask the guest to completely disregard it and insist accident happened, perhaps place a napkin on top of the stain so no one has to look at it for the rest of the meal. It's part of life and a risk you take as a host. If you can't stand the idea of your baccarat or your sandwich glasses being broken as they get knocked down, don't set them on the table to begin with. Your irritation at a broken glass will be felt by everyone around the table, will break up the mood. However, as a guest, if you're responsible for breaking what you know is an expensive item, then I suggest you replace it at the earliest possible occasion. There is always a timing for a dinner party or a formal lunch. It should last about 2.5 hours from start to finish. Thus, the party should start winding down after 2 hours. As a host, if you wish to keep some of your guests behind in order to gossip about everyone else after they have left, you have to let them know on arrival. Always have a friend who will give the signal that it's time to unwind the party. As a guest, never forget to thank the host, and a thank you note should be sent in the same manner the invitation has been sent to begin with, usually within 72 hours of the party. It isn't your role as a guest to offer to help to clean up. Most hosts will have this under control and most likely wish to do it at their own pace. And by the way, it is usually when most breakages occur. Taking plates to the kitchen when a host has no staff is one thing. Starting to wash up or stack the dishwasher is another one altogether and all too familiar and thus inappropriate in most situations. Mobile phones, of course, they should be turned off and out of the way unless one of the guests is an emergency doctor and on call. In this case, they should have excused themselves to their host beforehand, explaining the situation. I believe a doctor on call, if he knows he's going to be on call, should not accept an invite to begin with. Any business call should be made after the meal and out of earshot from everyone. No one, trust me, is that important. As a guest, if you know there is a chance you may be interrupted for a matter that is vital to you, then again, explain and apologize to the host or hostess in advance. Check your phone only when you go to the bathroom or you excuse yourself from the table so that not everyone else has to witness the fact that you're taking a call. Our grandparents and parents dealt with emergency without mobile phone and everything went fine. If you meet with an emergency, however, then excuse yourself to your host and leave with minimum fuss so as not to break up the dinner party. Most of the really important and busy people I have come across in my life make a point of honor to always arrive on time. For lunch or dinner party that is within 15 minutes stated on the invite. Arriving early can put your host in a very embarrassing situation as they might not be quite ready for you yet. The host and hostess, of course, should be ready on time. If you meet with a real accident, try to let your host and hostess know as soon as possible so they can take your place setting out of their setting. In any case, if you haven't warned them, a host and hostess are duty bound to wait for at least 20 minutes of the time specified on the invite. If a guest is late or a no-show, then dinner will not be served until 9 p.m., let's say for an 8:30 sit-down service, because everyone will be waiting. You are making it inconvenient for everyone else around the table, and that's not quite fair. If you know some of the guests you're inviting are habitually late, and I have a few of those friends in my book, then the time stated on the invite is always half hour earlier than anyone else. If the guest has warned the host that he will arrive a few minutes late for whatever reason, the host will keep his seat around the table, and the late arrival is supposed to pick up dinner wherever it's at when he arrived. A guest cannot accept for the first course to be served again when everybody else is almost finished with the main. If a guest notices that he will arrive at the time after the main course is served, they better not show up at all, as it will embarrass and inconvenience everybody else. So by doing that, a guest has not filled his side of the contract in accepting an invitation and is in a debit position vis-a-vis the host. Pets, we love pets, but they shouldn't be seen around the dinner table, and they should not be afoot. Many people may not share your idea of that a pet is welcome around on your knees while you're eating, feeding it morsels, and some of your guests may simply be allergic to animals. Your pets should be locked away somewhere else and not mingle with your guests. Nor should young children. No guest wants to be seated next to your 10-year-old, regardless of what a genius or prodigy he might be, and is not expected to entertain your child for the next 2 hours. Unless, of course, it's a family event, and then, of course, all generations will be mixed. Other considerations that are part of etiquette. People are very nosy. It's part of human nature. And while I would not expect a guest to open cabinets in the bathroom put at their disposal, I know they do. First of all, make sure you have a candle burning in the guest bathroom and plenty of toilet paper on hand. Individual guest towels and a basket to put them in is a really nice touch. You also may wish to have aspirin or Panadols handy in a little bowl. I always add also a clean hairbrush, a deodorant, and hand cream, and present it in such a way that guests know it is there for their benefits. If the guest bathroom is the only bathroom in the house, just make sure it is clean and tidy and all medication are hidden. No one needs to know you pop Prozac, suffer from feet fungus, or require eczema cream. Those should be hidden away. Likewise, don't let papers you don't wish anyone to read laying on your desk in your study or leave dirty underwear on your unmade bed. While on principle, there is no reason for anyone to go to your study or your bedroom, you'd be surprised how many guests do. Same goes for jewelry. If anything goes missing, who will you accuse? One of your guests? Don't lead anyone into temptation. Just hide them. It's the safest bet. Music is a big part of a party as it creates an ambiance and adds another layer to the overall tone of your event. The music you should have planned on the music lasting at least for 3 hours without having to change the record or the tape. It will always be louder in the first half hour of the event so as to look as if the room is full of people, and then completely put on low during dinner time. Same goes for lighting. Proper lighting is vital in creating a mood. Direct lighting is unflattering. Look at me on this screen, and fails to convey any type of intimacy. However, there should be enough light for guests to be able to read their menu or find their place card and see what it is they are eating. A mixture of ceiling down lights and strategically placed side lamps work best in creating a warm and cozy atmosphere. Candles, of course, always add a sophisticated touch as their beauty lies in their ephemerality. Centerpiece. A floral centerpiece should never be made up of flowers with a perfume so strong as to interfere with the aroma of the dishes being served. It should be relatively low in height so it doesn't interfere with the guest visibility of the person sitting opposite them. Centerpiece should be displayed along the center of the table from one end to the other so that everyone can enjoy them equally, not just those in the middle of the table. Same goes for candelabras. They should be high enough so that when the candles burn down, they are not at eye level, becoming hypnotic and lulling the guests to sleep. Centerpieces complete the table setting and will focus on the theme of the evening. The host can mix objects, fruit, flowers, branches, and so on, and is only limited by his or her imagination. Smoking. Well, hosting a dinner party is not the time to be intolerant of other people's bad habit. Some of your guests may be smokers and might find it difficult to go for 2.5 hours without a cigarette. Allow both a break in the proceeding and a place for them to smoke, preferably outside of the house, not to inconvenience the rest of your guests. Indicate the preferable spot by putting out ashtrays. In French culture, this break is usually scheduled after cheese and salad and served and before dessert is brought in. This break has 3 purposes. Those who smoke might finally light up. Those who may need to listen to their messages can do so, and the staff or host has time to reset the table for dessert. Dessert comes from the French term desservi, which means taking down the table, to make place for dessert, which is the crowning of a meal. By the time dessert is served, the table should have been stripped of all accoutrements except for dessert plates and corresponding cutlery. Bread basket, condiments, all of those should have been removed, leaving a bare minimum on the table. If a host planned on serving champagne or dessert wine, then all the other glasses need to be removed. It's also a good time to sweep crumbs off the table and repair any accidents. I always pick this time to let guests switch seats if they wish to, since all cutlery has been removed. It no longer matters where they sit down. Tea or coffee are usually served outside of the meal, and as a host, you should have them offer both decaffeinated and real coffee, herbal teas, and normal tea. Coffee is rarely served at the table. It is usually served in another room altogether, on a terrace where guests can be comfortably seated, stretch their leg, meal around, and chat to people other than their 2 immediate guests during dinner. In some culture, though, once dessert has been taken away, guests will remain seated around the table and continue their conversation. However, a guest at this point is no longer obligated to stay. He can excuse himself to take his leave at any time. From a strict etiquette point of view, you should stay at least 20 minutes after tea and liquors are served. A guest is not duty-bound to salute everyone he has met during the dinner party, just his host. It's never the host's responsibility to arrange for a guest ride home. Indeed, booking you a taxi or Uber will take him away from the other guests, and that is not quite fair. A return home should have been arranged beforehand. A host is unfortunately duty-bound to ensure your safe passage if you're too drunk or too sick, as it borders on legal issue. As you can see, observing simple yet ancestral etiquette rule is simply akin to putting yourself in someone else's shoes for the time it takes to get through an event. Selfishness and etiquette have never belonged in the same sentence. Etiquette is only redundant if you live like a hermit. It is always relevant when you enjoy other people's company. So this is done for my course. So if you have any questions or comment that you would like or you would care to share, or an anecdote for which a host or a guest reacted a particular way and you still don't know what should have been done at the time, you're welcome to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carline. I think this was amazing. You made us smile a few times and feel like we're not alone in this world. So this was amazing to hear that from you. There's actually a lot of really interesting comments, lots of questions coming through. We have a question from Roselyne asking about the tutoiement. Is there an etiquette for that or a nice way? She's Australian. She'd like to know how this should be asked.
One of my pet peeves, because tutoiement is great amongst friends, or it is a way, let's say you have been introduced properly to someone with a title, de vouvoiement, etc. And by the end of dinner, you have found a common bond. Then it's your responsibility to ask that person, do you mind if I give you the tutoiement? Otherwise, keep your distance. One of the two people are going to break it by saying, oh, please call me by my first name, forget my title, give me the tutoiement. Otherwise, don't do it.
Okay. Well,
does that answer?
That answers the question. Catherine noticed that the cutlery was turned face down on some of the images, and I haven't seen this done before. Is there a rule?
The French always will have the cutlery turned down. Most of the cutlery makers in France, and certainly Christofle is one of them, the cutlery is finished on both sides. It means that unlike English cutlery, where you have the stamping on the back side, then you can only turn it upright. If you go back in history, I think the French have always done the cutlery with the tines down, simply because people, through the Middle Ages, when there was only one fork and a knife at a table, will talk with their hands, and there had been so many accidents of people piercing through their hands and hurting themselves. Then it was Louis XIV who says that all the cutlery should be turned down to avoid accidents at the table.
Okay, we had a webinar before about the bread, and it's actually a good, a bad thing to do, to put the bread upside down, because that's how they were telling people in prisons that the day is going to be tomorrow. So is that true that there's a tradition that the bread should never ever be upside down, or is that just from the Middle Age?
Okay, it is part of it is part of convention, but if you see table settings up to, let's say, 1960s, in French table, there was never bread served at the table. Because serving bread at the table is basically telling your guests, I'm not sure if I'm going to feed you enough, so please munch on the bread. And the bread, if you found it, was set in a basket and people helped themselves and not on the bread and butter plate. I personally feel that bread should only come out at the time of cheese, because if, as a hostess, you have well balanced your meal, there is no reason for anyone to need bread until they taste their cheese.
Okay. Yeah, we've had that cultural difference between France and Australia, where we don't serve the bread at the same time, and we definitely do not give it away before it all starts, because we don't expect our guests to eat the bread before they start.
Exactly.
Matthias has pointed out something interesting about the cultural variation on table manners, because we do have children. They're being raised here, but a lot of us are French. Where do you put your hands? The elbows on the table, the hands on the table? Is it not polite to put them under the table?
Elbow on the table, definitely a no.
Okay.
Your hands should be at your side, or if you're waiting between courses, they could be on your knee, as your knees will be underneath the table. Definitely not the elbow. No, because if you look at paintings and illustration of past century, you will notice that the only people with elbows on the table will be from, quote unquote, the lower classes. So it just does not register as good etiquette.
Okay, well, that's easy to know. What's the most complicated dinner you've ever organized, and how did you handle it?
My daughter, who's sitting in front of me, to make sure that if you have any question that require intervention on the computer, is there to assist. I used to entertain a great deal, and up to 20 people, and I could serve up to 8 courses. I enjoy hosting, because for me, that's the only true gift in a very busy lifestyle that you can give your friends. Everybody knows it takes time to prepare, it takes time to plan, it takes time to cook, and it takes time to make sure everybody is going to feel comfortable around the dinner party. The only caveat I have is, in doing that, I often have dinner party where people did not leave until 2 a.m. because they were really too much, enjoying themselves too much.
As a good dinner for them, maybe not for you.
Exactly. It's a bit too long for the hostess.
Yeah. We have a few comments on the tip you gave people about the candles, because they think it's lovely to know that they burn for 2.5 hours. So that's a really good tip.
Yeah, so the tip for the candle, and it's to, basically, like most things in life, you get what you pay for. So if the candles seem a bit expensive and they are long tapered candles, they will last on average 2.5 hours.
Yep.
So that's a perfect way of timing your dinner, as opposed to looking at a clock.
That's right. Roxy's got a question about wedding invitations.
Sure.
Are wedding invitations exclusive attendance to the ones on the invite? Am I correct?
Sorry, can you repeat that? Wedding invitation?
It's only for wedding invitations. I think you already gave us the answer, but wedding invitations are exclusive attendance to the ones on the invite. Am I correct?
Yes, of course. But so it is for a dinner party.
Any invite.
It's the invite is stating exactly who it is you want to invite. You may not know that your latest friend has met a new boy on the weekend and would like him to attend. If the conversation hasn't occurred beforehand and he's not on the invite, then she assumes she's invited alone. If she wants him to be invited, either she can call the hostess, and I find that personally quite rude, because it puts the hostess in an awkward position, or simply refuse the invitation. No one is bound to accept the invitations they get. But once they do, they should play the game.
Okay. We've got questions about knives, actually. Is it okay to use a knife rest at a dinner party?
Of course. But the knife rest, when you set the table, the knife is not on the knife rest. it is on the table. It is only going to be used once you have used your knife in order for you not to sully the pristine linen underneath.
And a question from Sebastian, is that rude to cross the knife and the fork at the end of the meal? Where do you put your cutlery at the end?
Okay, the cutlery should be put on the right inside of the plate, parallel to each other. Crossing the knife and fork does not necessarily, it does not indicate, contrary to what most people think, that you're finished. It indicates you have paused. Okay. So waiter will not remove your plate. So in order to indicate that you're finished, has to be paralleled at 4 o'clock on your plate.
And we have a comment from Matthias, who I've shared a lot of dinners with, and he says, exactly, we've always placed 2 rules. Boys and girls never sit next to your husband as wife, and wife is the second one. And that works really well.
Yeah, you always try to alternate guests. I mean, the idea of attending a lunch or a dinner party is for you to meet people you haven't met before. Mm. If you're sitting between your brother and your husband, you won't have much to talk about on the debrief on the way home.
That's right. And Brigitte wants to know what's the proper amount to spend on a hostess gift.
Rule of thumb, look at the invite. If you look at the invite and you have seen, I always have fun with my invite, so I give it a lot of thought. If I send a bottle of wine, let's say, you know, the bottle of wine is going to be $20 to $40 and the invite printed on it. Your hostess gift should be at least the equivalent of what a host will have spent on the invite. It's completely up to you. Okay. A bottle of chocolate doesn't cost much. It just needs to be nice chocolate. If you're very generous, it can be 48 of them, but it could be 4.
Yeah, well presented is the key.
Exactly.
Lots of comments coming through, and then we're going to have to let you go. But it's interesting to see some rules seem to be common sense when you want your guests to have a beautiful time. So we have a lot of those comments.
Yeah, it is etiquette. I think because the term is French, therefore it sounds intimidating. But you're absolutely right. It's all common sense and trying to put the well-being of the people you have invited first and foremost.
Yeah,
that's it.
And Matthias is saying, listening to you is like a time travel for me. Lots of these common sense rules are based on politesse de cœur, which unfortunately belongs nowadays to another time. And I don't think it does belong to another time. So to answer the webinar questions, relevant or redundant?
I think making other people comfortable around you and putting your best foot forwards to make sure they have a good time is always relevant.
I agree. It's very relevant.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Carline, for your time today. You're in Sydney, so we are really looking forward to welcoming you back in Brisbane anytime soon.
Thank you very much.
I hope we'll be able to do a masterclass with you in October when we're on, because the same as the cooking, the same as everything, it's nice to touch, to see, to be sitting at the table with you.
I like this format as well. It's not bad.
Okay, well, we can do it again. Thank you very much. And I'm going to be printing your presentation and make sure it's visible at my home for anyone, my children, my guests, everyone, so that they know the rules.
If you're going to print my my talk, I need to correct a couple mistakes I noticed at the last minute.
No problem. We haven't shared that with the public yet. I'm just going to make my own notes and I will magnify it and just put the house rules.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you.
And anyone who has a question, it's easy to send me a question at carline@christofle.com.au. I'll be happy to answer.
That's very nice of you. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I don't know if you have registered yet, but in a few hours at 6 o'clock, we will be joining Amanda. I just noticed that Amanda was listening to your talk today, and she's our champagne expert, and she will go through the basic of champagne and where it comes from, why it's called champagne, and not bubbles. It's very important. So we will learn a lot of things from Amanda.
I will listen to the talk with a bubbly in hand.
Yeah, so it's been a long day. Happy Bastille Day, everyone, and we will see you very soon and hopefully at the next festival. Thank you very much.